We're here to empower high-income earners to gain back control of your time through financial independence and stop trading your time for money and start letting your money work harder for you.
And hey, if you want to meet other high-income earners on their FIRE journey, join our High Income Earners FIRE Facebook group. Every month, we'll have guest speakers and we'll share about what our team is currently working on and allow you to share what you are working on with other high-income earners. Welcome, everyone, to the High Income Earners FIRE podcast. I'm your host, Eileen Prack, joined by my other co-host, Cody Ye. So welcome to the show. We have a fantastic guest for you today, Dr. Sam Giordano, and he is a practicing physician, gastroenterologist. And he's also an author, a real estate investor, co-founder of PassiveAdvantage.com, which is a website designed to help physicians and other high-income professionals vet passive real estate syndication deals. And really his focus is on education, helping other physicians like himself get financially educated, gain financial literacy. So we are so grateful to have you on the show today, Sam. Welcome.
No, it's my pleasure, guys. Thanks, Cody. Thanks, Eileen. Thanks for having me on. It's great to talk to you guys.
So Sam, can you give us a little bit more of a background on yourself and, what are some of the different streams of incomes that you've been able to utilize to help you achieve your FIRE or your financial independence?
So I'm a physician, as you guys said. I born and raised in New Jersey. So I grew up here and sort of did all my training in New Jersey. And I'm about 10 years out of training now. So I can't believe how time flies. And so my wife and I are both physicians and we have 3 young kids. And initially, when I first got out of training, I was mainly focused on paying down my debt, paying down credit cards, paying off student loans, trying to save for house down payment and things like that. So I think that's not uncommon for most physicians. And unfortunately, the student loan burden these days is even more than it was when I was finishing 10 years ago. And then you've kind of focus on that, maybe the first, depending on how much debt you have, 2 to 5 years out of training. I generally instruct some of the fellows and residents that I teach to try to focus on that debt pay down strategy. And that's kind of what I did. And then after I got through that, we then were maxing out our pre-tax retirement accounts, maxing out our children's 529 accounts, investing in taxable brokerages account once we sort of max out those windows, and then also doing the backdoor Roth IRA just because the income qualifications don't often allow you to contribute directly to the Roth IRA. So that's kind of all I knew at that point in time. And that was my focus, to just continue that way and then save and work for 20, 30 years. And then eventually, if I got to the point of financial independence, then I can decide if I want to keep working or if I want to retire. So I guess early on, that was my focus, sort of the basic foundation. And I'll kind of stop there and see if you guys have any additional questions. I can certainly go into more of the income streams that I parlayed into as time went on.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question about that because you were maxing out your 401ks, your Roths, 529B plans for your kids and everything like that. As you're contributing it, you're maxing it out. Did you really see the end to that? Was it really a great strategy for you, traditionally to take a look at it, to be able to achieve the goals, to be able to retire when you expected to retire, and to be able to feel the financial side for your kids' educations as well?
Yeah. So, at the time, it was really all I knew. And believe it or not, there's a lot of physicians these days that don't even know that kind of component of just basic investing and pre-tax retirements versus taxable and Roth. So the good thing about the personal finance space is you can get a lot of information with a small amount of effort. And there's a clear diminishing returns. Like once you get to a baseline level of knowledge in the personal finance space, it's not that difficult how to go down that sort of initial realm. I'm not someone who likes to pick stocks. I don't know which ones are going to be good, not good. I don't buy the latest Tesla. I'm just like a classic index fund investor, invest in a few funds. I just keep it on automatic. And there's a book by David Bach, The Automatic Millionaire, and a couple other books that I read early on in my journey where the key is setting things up automatically, and then once that's done, there's not a lot of brain power it takes going forward. It's really just setting up those systems early on. So that worked for me then. But the issue with that approach is that even if you save a good amount of money, it still could take you 20 or 30 years to you reach what's called like the financial independence number, where you could generally derive that for yourself individually by either multiplying your yearly expenses, for example, like $100,000 times 25, which is a 4% sort of withdrawal rate in your retirement, or multiplying that by 33, which is like a 3% withdrawal rate. So in that scenario, if your expenses were $100,000, you would need to then save like either 2.5 million or 3.3 million in those methods that I had previously mentioned to get to that financial independence number. But when you then combine that with real estate investing and some other things that I'm doing now, it sort of truncates that sum, and that sort of impetus to starting the education in real estate for physicians and things around that realm to try to allow physicians and other high income professionals to get there in a shorter period of time.
Awesome. I love it. Is there any like common myth among physicians? It's definitely, from my own dad, I learned it, but I would like to hear from you because you help a lot of physicians, a lot of high income earners. What are the common fears that they have, or common myth that they believe in that you try to bust that myth?
Yeah. So physicians by nature are conservative people. But interestingly enough, in the personal finance realm, they don't often do all the due diligence they should, and they're more trustworthy. So there's a couple things that go against physicians in this space, in that if there's, not to give a bad name to any insurance brokers or disability insurance brokers or whole life insurance brokers, there are scenarios that whole life and things like that are good. But early on, some of these people try to prey on physicians to give you a fear, and they sort of work on the conservative nature. You shouldn't have disability insurance. You certainly should, but in scaring doctors to say you've invested all this money, you need to get your disability insurance this early on in your cycle, or you need to do whole life insurance because down the road it's going to be better for you. And a lot of these are high fee-based insurance products that doctors are subject to, unfortunately. And so oftentimes I've had a number of friends that have invested in these whole life products earlier than they really need to. And then down the road, they wanted to see what they could to get themselves out of those areas. So I think one of the myths, but in a sense, one of the truths, is that physicians, by being conservative, there are certain sectors of the personal finance world that can prey on that and then use it against them. And then the second thing is that physicians are generally, what got them to where they were is to be intelligent, be good students, having the ability to adapt and learn things, which is all true. But the negative is you think you kind of know more than you do in some of these spaces. And oftentimes you can kind of get involved in things. You're like, oh yeah, that's going to be good. I know this guy is a good guy. And then next thing you know, it doesn't work out that way. So there are a few sort of built-in things that go against physician's nature, and that's part of the reason that I think you guys are doing some of what you do, and I do some of what I do in terms of trying to educate people, so that it's not as if you can't make up for lost ground, but it's nice if you can kind of go into these endeavors with the education there so that you can decrease some of the mistakes you may make down the road and help you kind of get to where you want to be sooner.
Which is awesome. In case people don't see, I was like smiling, almost not like laughing, but I just keep nodding my head because that's how I grew up. I seen it with my own eyes. I heard many times because I have a lot of physicians, alumni in my stock option investing course as well. And they told me similar stories, either themselves, their wife, or their friends. And I'm not saying anything bad about that, but I heard they use the word as, hey, all the physicians, they're just blind leading other blind, not in the expertise world, but in the finance world. It's just one person asks the wrong question, one person gives the wrong answer, then just blind leads blind. Again, every group is like that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's true. And that's why there's such a need for good quality education and I feel like simplifying things, making these sort of education methods approachable, especially in the physician personal finance space, but I think in general as well.
So for you, Sam, like you teach a lot of financial literacy to your peers and your coworkers and other people, similar situations to yourself. What is a basic baseline that you teach in terms of financial literacy that they might not necessarily be aware of, or, that might be something new to them?
Yeah. So when I teach like residents and fellows, I kind of look at it as like a pyramid, to where you want to kind of get your main sort of risk in check. Now, I was just kind of speaking a second ago about some of the negatives of the insurance, but there are real needs for insurance first as a physician in terms of disability insurance. If you have people that depend on you, whether it be loved ones or kids, you definitely should have some sort of life insurance in place. I'm a big proponent of term insurance, but of down the line, sort of parlay into real estate syndications, there may be a role for whole life insurance or universal insurance at that point in time, but not generally early in a physician's career. Is that something that you want to do? So once you have those insurances in place, you sort of garner against catastrophe, make sure you have your auto, your home, your umbrella insurance. And then if you do have a side business or investing on the side, you want to make sure you have your proper sort of entity structures, your LLCs in place. And then once again, if you have kids or people that depend on you, then eventually you want to get like an estate plan in place. So those are like the foundationary pieces. You want to get that stuff in place from an overall looking at the personal finance realm. And once you get that in place, then you can start to use the extra money for the debt pay down, focus on that, especially if it's high interest debt, like certain student loans, credit cards, stuff like that. Then, depending on your risk tolerance, you can, if you have a low student loan interest or you have a mortgage, you can then decide what your threshold is for paying that down. And then after that, that's when you sort of get into or maxing out the pre-tax retirement accounts and then doing the children's 529s. And then as you go up the pyramid, the next is that taxable account. Because unless you're a sole proprietor or you have like some esoteric plans, like a defined benefit plan where you can really sock away a lot of pre-tax retirement income, then you would have to do, your next option is like the taxable investing account, which is no limit to it, but it's just post-tax money. So that's sort of the basics of what you do. And then on top of that is when I would consider like real estate syndications or alternative investing, where people maybe 7 to 10 years into their career, that's maybe when they start to look into some of that stuff.
I love it how you subtly mention about the timeline. Again, everyone has their own timeline. Everyone has their own situation. But if an ideal physician, ideal student of yours, top A, very interested in personal finance, like, Sam, help me build my ideal financial life. How would that look like? Like not dependent on age, because everyone's different, but depending on like when they graduate from school, kind of what would you say? Hey, first 1 to 5 years, do this. 5 to 10 years, do this kind of thing. I know it's kind of generalized things, but what would be the ideal roadmap?
Yeah, I think early on, the debt pay down and getting the insurance in place is key. So I would say that time frame is probably like the first 3 to 5 years. Like I feel that all physicians, if their student loan interest is under like $200,000 to $250,000, you should be able to pay that off within 5 years. And that's aggressive, but that's what I truly feel. And then if somebody has like 400 or real, high burden of student loans, then you really have to be cognizant about some of these esoteric programs, such as like PSLF, which is like a public student loan forgiveness, that if you work at particular hospitals and residency programs for 10 years, you can then get your student loans forgiven in a period of time if you pay what's called like an income-based repayment or a certain minimum. So I think the first timeline would be that first 3 to 5 years where you really need to focus on getting your insurances in place, debt pay down, and maybe doing your pre-tax retirement accounts and your Roth accounts, and then the pre-tax up to like the employer match. You definitely don't want to give away money that they're going to give to you for free. So I would say that would be the timeline of the first 5 years. And in that 5 to 10 years.
Before you move on, can I jump in and ask you a quick question here? Before you move on to the next 5 years, the first 5 years.
Yeah.
While you mentioned about that, would you suggest people start investing while they're paying down their debt, or should they just wipe down their debt first? Because I don't know what is the interest rate for a physician in terms of their student debt. The only thing I heard about is even if you go bankrupt, I have friends that joke about, I'm just going to go claim bankrupt. And then I learned that even if you claim bankrupt, you are still on hook for your student loan.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the negative. So I would invest as you go, but I would say if you have student loans that are over like a 3% interest rate, and this is just, there's no science to that, it's just my arbitrary feeling on it, then you should really try to get those student loans paid off. But you should also be investing in your pre-tax retirement accounts, because the max these days is only about 20,500. So you should be able to afford to do that. But in the lease, say you didn't want to do that, then you should at least get up to the employer match. And then you should definitely do your Roth IRA. If you, as much of the money you can get into that tax-free space as early as you can and allow the compound interest to kind of take place. I would definitely do those investing and do the debt, focus on the debt pay down those first 5 years.
Cool. No, that's a great answer. Yeah. Please move on to the next 5 years. I'm just so
excited.
excited.
So the next 5. So the good thing is once these methods are in place, those first 5 years, but the hope would be that the student loans are paid off and the credit cards are paid off. You got your pre-tax retirement plan set up. Then that's when you start to focus on the taxable investing. And the taxable investing in my mind is not rocket science. I have a taxable investing account and it's literally like 4 funds. It's like a total market fund, a total international ex-US. I do put a little small cap value in there. And then I have like a municipal bond fund, a tax-free muni bond fund, just because of the income advantages in people who have high income. That's it in my taxable account. And I set the amount, X amount, every paycheck goes into my brokerage account, and then X amount gets invested every 2 weeks, just the dollar cost average. Right. And it's on autopilot. I don't have to keep doing that. It comes out direct deposit from my account. So there's no more brain power that takes. And then once you have excess money, you start to develop a nest egg in the taxable account. That's when I started to look into ways to then minimize my taxes or decrease my taxable burden, and then also diversify my taxable income. And living in a high tax state in New Jersey, when in 2017, when they enacted the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, when we lost the ability to deduct state and local income taxes, my wife and I, being both physicians, although she's part-time, we took a big hit financially from that. And that's when I was like, there's got to be ways out there that I can mitigate some of these additional risks. And that's when I started to look into real estate investing. So now I've cut that taxable amount down to about half, and I use half of that amount that was going in taxable and any additional monies that come in that I want to earmark towards investing to put towards my passive real estate investments. And so all those other things are in place. So it's kind of like each step builds on each other. And then once they're in place, it's just a matter of continuing to do it.
So what would you say would be like a percentage of your portfolio that you've broken up your investments in, like real estate versus the other types of investments that you participate in?
Yeah, so my goal sort of diversification is probably about 20% real estate, and then 20 to 25% real estate. And I would say 75% traditional equities. And that's not counting my personal residence though, even though some people may put that in there, some not. So if you count my personal residence, then it's probably closer to maybe 35%. But I'm just a bigger proponent on the real estate. And I feel like now I've done, 12 plus syndications, and I've been doing this for about 4 years. I feel like I have a little bit of a competitive advantage from a limited partner standpoint and kind of vetting these deals and learning about these deals. And now I have the sponsor relationships, and now I could it gives me whereas if I'm trying to pick stocks or figure out, do some of that stuff, I don't have a huge competitive advantage unless it's in like my space, like my medical space or gastrointestinal space, then I may. So I try to utilize, one, I believe in the asset class of real estate, and two, I try to utilize some of the competitive advantage that I feel like I have in that space versus someone who may be just starting out as a passive investor in real estate.
Interesting. One point you said you're going heavier in real estate, but at the same time, you only put in 20 to 25% in real estate, but 80% equity. Did I get the message wrong or?
Yeah. So since I've been investing in the stock market and equities now, since I was just after college, so the general nest egg I have in my taxable account, combined with my retirement accounts, combined with my Roth account, I would say the overall allocation at this point is that, just because of the fact that I'm putting in real estate ongoing. But eventually my desired allocation is probably about 25 to 35% real estate. But it's not quite there yet, just because I have so much ground to make up, because I haven't been investing in real estate as long, whereas I've only been investing in real estate for 4 years, whereas I started 15 years ago investing in the market.
And I know it sounds like you probably will be increasing more of that percentage to catch up in that real estate, like 20 to 25, maybe now you're 10 or whatever, but you're trying to catch up to 25%.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Kind of tell us the journey of you say you got into 12, that kind of limited partnership, And then kind of take us through that journey of where you are right now and what do you see yourself doing in the future?
Yeah, it's difficult. When I first was learning about I primarily focus on real estate syndication and investing as a limited partner, to where there's a couple draws to that as a physician or in my personality. One, I still work full time. And so I don't have a ton of time to manage tenants and manage the problems and look around for properties and do all that at this moment in time. Two, as a physician, I'm really not looking at any additional liability risk than already is there natively as a physician. So when you're a limited partner in these deals, they are generally within their own LLC. So you're at risk of losing your own partnership interest, but you're not at risk if somebody, God forbid, falls and breaks their leg, of suing you and then they taking away your assets. So if a physician owns that apartment on their own, there may be some additional tax benefits, but they have to worry about, they just got to make sure their asset protection is really tight to protect them from any of that sort of outside litigation opportunity. So, and then the last thing is, I think that there allows like a compounding effect. My goal in general is to invest, depending on where I am financially that year, in 2 to 4 syndications a year. So initially it was like 1 to 3. And now that I have syndications that are making me more money, then I can use some of that money from the syndications on top of what I'm putting in fresh of my own after-tax income to invest in more syndication. So if you invest, and on our website, there's a tracker called a Path to Financial Independence piece within some of the tools that we have, whereas it looks at if you invest roughly $100,000 a year, and that's a real, like maybe only 2 deals depending on the minimum, and you allow that to compound at a roughly a rate of 7 to 8% rate, and some of these internal rate of returns could be even high, 14 to 16. So this is a fairly conservative assessment. And you want to cover, say, 120,000 of income, you could technically reach that number in 7 to 8 years. And that's not even taking into consideration the previous taxable and equities and stock investing you're doing. So when I saw that chart initially, and that's why I felt strongly about putting it into that, because I felt like it's motivating and it really is eye-opening how quickly you can reach financial independence with real estate investing. And when you combine it with stock and equities investing, it's even more dramatic.
With the potential of having a capital event even sooner than the 3 to 5 years or something like that, there's a potential for it to be sold earlier or exit earlier. And then that just adds to the compounding impact of it on top of all the taxable benefits that you're getting from it. And
I ask sponsors that when I'm investing in these deals, and that's not everyone's focus, but for me now, my focus is on velocity. So some people may want a 10-year hold deal. A lot of the deals may have a 5-year hold. If there's a capital event early, then that's just quicker that I can deploy it into other deals and just kind of keep the ball rolling. So at this juncture, I'm more focused on deals where they kind of look to accomplish the value add component. It doesn't have to be all value add. I also do some self-storage and some mobile home investing, but the majority of my real estate investments are in multifamily value add deals, to where they can do the value add component, either refi or cash out or sell. And then we get sort of a liquidation event, and then I can deploy that capital. And I may still, if it's just a refi, I may still be getting cash flow from the deal, but I may have gotten
infinite returns.
all or most of my money back. And then next thing you know, it's just, so this kind of chart where it says, where you can see that in 7 to 8 years doesn't even assume any of those things. So if you have a few deals that finish early, then all of a sudden it truncates it even more. So it's really powerful to kind of see how quickly. Now, granted, 100,000 a year is not an insignificant amount of money to invest, and not everyone may be able to do that. But if you could, then it's just so powerful how quickly you can achieve some of those financial freedom metrics.
Yes. And I think it's very motivating too, because I'm literally looking at this chart right now. I have a very similar chart I make for stock option investor for my alumni. It looks very similar to this, with the line of when you can replace your full-time income with, if you do like dollar cost average going like that. And a lot of people are so shocked when they see that, right? And it actually motivates them to save more and to continue on this. Because if you don't see the end goal, a lot of people fell off, right? Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Or they're already there, but they don't even realize they're there, and then continue to push for no reason, right?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And that's a big component of these things. Is I tell people that I'm talking about syndication investing in general, I say, the biggest thing is you have to start with the end in mind. You have to see where you want to be, what your vision is. Because you can see some of these numbers and see some of the income. If you don't really envision like where you want it to be, then sometimes you can lose yourself along the way. And then once you have that in place, then you can sort of say that's a 10-year plan. You can back engineer, where should I be in 5 years? Where should I be in 2 years? Where should I be in 1 year? Am I on track? Am I not on track? So it gives you kind of goalposts to see how you're doing along the way, and then to give you something to look forward to when you achieve that. And it's not to say you're going to just quit your job and not do anything anymore, but you may then want to cut back to a day a week less, or 2 days a week less, to a 3-day work week, or you just keep doing what you're doing and you just kind of have that in there, and it just allows you to work in ways that you can kind of eliminate some of the extra stressors in your job, or the things that you don't necessarily enjoy doing as much.
Yeah. And so that's perfect, Sam. What is your definition of FIRE, and what does that look like for you? Like, you're investing and you're putting all these things into different diversified portfolios, but what does that really look like for you in the end? Like, what are you trying to achieve in terms of your financial independence, and what does that vision look like for you?
Yeah, no, and it's a great question, Eileen. And it evolves, I think initially my goal was to achieve like 10,000 a month passive income. That was kind of where it was at. But to be honest with you, I may be in the minority, but I love what I do as a physician. I love my job. I feel like it's sort of an honor and a blessing to be able to do what I do. So I'm not looking to stop working. So my goal is really just to get to a point. Financial independence for me means that if I couldn't work, or God forbid something happened to me, or something happened to a family member where I couldn't rely on doing what I do every day as a physician, that I could then cover expenses if I want to travel. So to me, it's about getting to a point where I can achieve that. So in doing that, you have to kind of monitor your expenses and not let your expenses get to you out of hand too, because otherwise then it becomes like a moving target. So for me, that's really what it is, to have the ability to kind of cover my expenses, cover what we call lifestyle expenses. If I wanted to get a car, if I wanted to go on vacation. And once I get to that point, I don't think I'll change anything, but it's just a matter of knowing that I can go to work, but I really don't have to go to work. I think I'm not quite there right now, but even at the point I'm at, I definitely have a large amount of passive income coming in. It just gives you an additional sense of freedom and an additional sense of clarity in terms of what are the things at my job that I like doing, what do I not like doing? Can I eliminate that half day a week? There's just a sense of freedom from achieving that, whether it's partially or fully. And that's sort of the ultimate goal for me at this juncture.
Fantastic, Sam. And so we are up to our lightning round now, Sam. On our podcast here, we would like to ask, and we like to speed round, ask you a couple of questions on, your financial, your FIRE journey so far. So are you ready for that?
I think so.
All right. So the first question that we have is, if you were to become a billionaire tomorrow and you could do whatever you want, what would your day look like?
The same as it looks right now. I really wouldn't change anything. I feel blessed to have the life that I have and to do what I do. And I really wouldn't change. Like, I feel like there's been times where I've gone like on a 2-week vacation. And I'm just like, you know what? I think this is maybe like 4 or 5 days too long. And like, I think you have to keep the balance between leisure activities and doing things that you think you would want to do versus kind of having some purpose-driven activities, whether it be a job or whether it be volunteering. And I feel like I have a good balance of that. So at the moment, I wouldn't change any component of it.
I think that's such a great answer. And I think it's becoming more popular, at least in my own personal lifestyle, is that instead of, a lot of people think, hey, once we retire, we're going to take a lot of vacation. But I think it's getting more popular that we take mini vacation. Instead of taking 1 vacation per year or 4 vacation in 3 months, take vacation kind of throughout the year. So you kind of get recharged and you come back to work and you're like, I need a little bit of recharge. And you go on it and you feel really meaningful on the trip. Personally, for me, 5 to 10 days is the best timing, but over 10 days, I'm kind of like, I actually kind of miss work.
I agree with you.
You gotta live life. You gotta live life as you go along. You gotta take that time to really be appreciative and take that time to spend and take a couple of days off to rest and relax.
Yeah. And I think the moderation is key. Like you can say that really for everything, whether it's the amount of work you do, the amount of vacation you do, the amount of food you indulge in, the amount of exercise. Like, you hear it all the time, but it's really important to kind of think about it and apply it to your life in ways that you can keep a balance of things and not let anything get too out of whack.
On point, Sam. So next question would be, if somehow something happened, you lose everything, all your money, everything, but you have your brain, you have your knowledge, you have your intelligence, and we give you a golden parachute starting with $500,000, how would you start again?
The tough thing is becoming a physician is a long road. Like, it's, for my specialty, it took me 10 years. So I don't know at my age that I would do all that again, even though I love becoming a physician. But I think I would still do the real estate stuff, and I would still do passive investing, because if you could invest some of that 500,000, say 10 deals, and then you start using the cash flow, and then I would start that as a base with my passive real estate investing, and then kind of figure out how to make money other ways on the side. Kind of keep doing what I'm doing now. I probably would just make a little as my day job versus what I do now, but I wouldn't change a whole lot. I would do the physician thing again, but I don't know that I would do 10 years at 40, because then I'm crunching down my retirement amount.
And so if you were a podcast host and you could interview anybody in the world, whether it be, in the past or somebody current, well, who would that be?
That's a great question. At this point, and it's kind of sentimental, and I hate to take it to that point, but my father passed away like 6 months into med school for me. When I graduated med school, within 6 months of graduating med school. And so, although I had a great relationship with him and we got to do a ton of things together, there's part of me that I wish he could kind of see me where I'm at and see my family where it is now. And, I tell people who still have both of their parents to make sure you take time to create quality time. So I would love to interview him and see how I did and kind of see my kids. So I think it would probably be my father.
Yeah.
Very interesting, because we have past physician come on, give very similar answer. That's very cool.
And the difficulty is, like, as when you're becoming a physician, like, I would never trade it for where I am. I keep saying that, but I really do mean it. But the years that you're usually kind of like living life, and I mean, we go to college, but then after college, I had to do 4 years med school, 3 years of residency, 3 years of gastroenterology fellowship. So that's 10 years outside of college. And that's your, mid 20s to early 30s. So the people who although we sacrifice, the people who sacrifice the most are the people around us, because we're just can't be as present when we're working 80-hour work weeks. And then you kind of push back when you have kids and those kind of things. So you may be having kids a little later. And so sometimes you feel like, I wish I could have had kids a little younger so my mom could be around a little longer, or my dad could be around a little longer. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that other physicians say that, because some of those family relationships and those time with the family during that period of time, you do sacrifice a little bit of that. So it's not surprising in some ways to hear you say that.
I think that relates to a lot of other high income professionals like lawyers, accountant. A lot of time have to go for those certification as well. So give a good segue into our next question for you is chatting about, you would like to interview your dad and all that. Now that you have your financial security and you have kind of your wish list, what are some ways that you would like to give back, or have seen physicians give back? Not that you guys are not giving back, you guys are giving back on the front line.
Yeah.
But what are some other ways that you would like to start exploring?
Yeah, so I think I do it sort of a number of different ways. And this is also something that's personal for everybody. So my wife and I, coming back to that taxable investing account, we then formed like a donor advised fund. So where you then donate appreciated shares of the taxable investments into a charitable account. So we have a charitable account that invests in equities and grows. And then my wife and I and our kids, although they're young, we kind of have a meeting and we go over different charities that we want to allocate X amount of dollars per year to those charities of our choice that are meaningful to us. So that's one way. The second way is that I think some of the education that we're doing, either through the personal finance realm and teaching residents and fellows, or whether it be in the real estate space and trying to get people and other physicians more aware of investing in real estate and some of the things you want to look for. I think we look at that as giving back in some ways, although obviously there's some business, but at the same time, that's one of the other things. And then anytime people reach out to me, I'm always there to kind of help. I really enjoy helping people because I feel like as personally, I try to be as sort of direct in getting people like from where they are to where they want to be without making the road to be too convoluted. And I feel like some people need that sort of straight line direction. And so I try to do that for any people that sort of reach out to try to help any way I can. Those are some of the ways.
Yeah, no, fantastic, Sam. I really see it because, the way you communicate it and the way you put it together and present it, it's very clear cut, the path that they can to be able to reach to that financial independence. And a lot of times, people are visual learners. When you put on a paper like that, it makes it so much more clear. The goal is much more attainable. And then as you're working towards that. And so I think that you do a fantastic job of putting all that together.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And then, so for our listeners out there who are also interested in learning more about you, and what you're doing and, gain some more financial literacy for their own personal selves and apply it for their own journey, where's the best place that they can go?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, which is passiveadvantage.com. There we go over some of the personal finance stuff that we've discussed today and also sort of some of the real estate topics. And we have some tools there and a free ebook to download to kind of go over what you need to look at when you're investing in real estate syndication, to give you some background on real estate syndications. Or they can personally reach out to me at my email at sam@passiveadvantage.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Sam.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. It's been a fun discussion.
All the links mentioned in this episode are included in the show notes. And if you love this episode, please leave us a rating and review on Apple iTunes. The link is also included in the show notes. And we would really appreciate your help in spreading the word to more high income earners on how they too can maximize both their time and money.
Also, if you still haven't joined our High Income Earners Facebook group, you are missing out on High Income Earners community where we help each other reach our own version of FIRE.